Good evening. This is the, I'm Tom Atkin. This is the Perrysburg City Council meeting for Tuesday, June 16th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Here.
Mr. Coolman.
Here.
Ms. Materney.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. Matuzak.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody please stand if you're able and join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Minutes of the June 2nd council meeting.
Thank you, Your Honor. Everyone has received a copy of the meeting minutes from June 2nd. Hearing that there is no objections, I'm going to go ahead and move to approve the minutes of the City Council meeting held on June 2nd, 2020 as written, and to dispense with the reading.
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Hoosen.
Yes. Thank you. I am not aware of any special reports, letters, communication, and citizens' concerns.
I did receive an email here this evening from a citizen. I'll read that in for the record, and I'll forward it over to Mary Jo afterwards. My yard, this is from Brenda Drummond of 971 Hickory Street. My yard has been torn up since late January for this project regarding Hickory Street water line project. Then COVID shut construction down in March, and we have remained in limbo since. For months, things just stopped. Now I'm afraid to come home every day to see what has been torn up. 2 weeks ago, more yard was damaged as a water drain was placed. Last week, a porta potty was strapped to a tree in my front yard. This week, more digging in the trench, but I can't tell why. Well, they did that digging, a large branch was damaged and remains lying in my yard for me to take care of. This was supposed to be a 120-day project beginning in early January. It's mid-June, and there is no end in sight. Do you have any information about when this mess will be finished? And I'll forward that over to the administration to hopefully respond to.
Thank you very much, Richard. The administrator is out of town today. She has some more information, but I think we will immediately forward that to the proper division to get a response out to her. So I think we appreciate the raising the concerns, and we apologize for inconvenience. She did recognize certain factors that certainly have impacted probably the timing, but certainly we can reach out to her. Thank you very much. Administrative reports. I have no report. The administrator is not here. Finance director.
I have no report tonight.
Director of Law is coming to the podium, so she gets a report.
I actually have no report. Just moving to the front
We do,
row.
I just want to say, the DORA, you want me to explain where we are before we get to where we're going to go with that?
Bring up to the president.
Yes, I think that President Smith is going to bring that up. I think everyone should have received the proposed dates that would comply with the statutory guidelines for publication, public hearings, and then consideration of legislation for the DORA. Again, I think President Smith is going to bring that up, but happy to answer any questions or concerns either now or then that you may have.
I do. Ms. Alcar, we are going to publish those meetings, correct? So the public will have input?
Correct. As I wrote in that email, it's required that we publish advertisement of any date and time and location of any hearing. We have to do that for 2 consecutive weeks, and I have to do that within 45 days of last Friday's date when it was conveyed to council. So as I'm proposing, I would propose publication on July 1st and July 8th. That would, and the reason I pushed that out was because we needed to have this conversation. I need to have the date and time of the public hearing to include it in the legal ad. So I'm asking for council to at least determine what that date and time might be.
I thought I saw something about August 4th or August 5th somewhere.
Correct. I laid out several dates, not only the advertisement dates of July 1st and July 8th, following council's protocol in 2019, you held a committee of the whole meeting, and then you held a public hearing. And then you can either take action following that public hearing, as long as it's a special council meeting of city council, or you could cover it at your next regularly scheduled meeting. I believe that's where you got the August 4th and then maybe the August 18th dates.
Well, I would like to see that we had lots of public input, and currently the way that things are set up now, I think Mr. Smith had mentioned we have possibly maybe another place where we could have discussion about this,
That's correct.
which I think would be a very good idea, so we could have lots of public input, because right now, we cannot.
Certainly, we would want to accommodate as much of the public as who wants to come. I don't know what the governor's guidelines will be after July 1st, but I think that it would be safest to assume that if they are exactly as they are now, we need to be able to accommodate the public. So we need to find a location large enough. President Smith and I talked about a couple municipal locations, or even possibly reaching out to the schools to see if a gymnasium or auditorium is available.
Or if it's good weather, like we could be like Rossford Council and sit outside on the lawn.
I would-
Socially distanced.
I would prefer that we stay inside and be able to maintain our recording system the best that we can to make that record.
I was only kidding.
I have no report.
President, just to follow up with that, the administration has given all the council, in addition to that, our conclusion and recommendations regarding the applicant, and have been working with the applicant regarding addressing some of the issues and addressing some of the concerns that have been raised, and those have been addressed in some part. So, President of Council, your schedule or suggestion how best to proceed.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. As everyone has already heard in the discussion, this is what I was going to bring up on my report. As everyone has received a copy of the application for DORA, I think that it would be most prudent to go with the timeline recommended by Ms. Elkire. So hopefully what we can do is set up a day and time for a committee of the whole that is that we are all available to. I am going to make a recommendation, as we had saw with the last DORA from Levis, how crowded this room was. And if all things stay the same, there's no way we're going to fit all those people in here. So I, with talking with Ms. Alkire prior to, we need to find a new location for this. I believe we can set that the date and time here, from what I understand. And there's nothing in the charter from my review as well that states that it has to be here. So hopefully we can find a location that will be suitable to allow the proper social distancing, as well as a numerous number of residents or concerned citizens to show up regarding this DORA, as well as giving enough for those who are submitting this to be able to bring as many people as they would like to in support as well. So the timeline we're looking for the committee of the whole is going to be July 27th to the 31st. I know Ms. Alkire recommended the 28th at 6 p.m. It would have to reschedule the Personnel and Safety Committee, but is there any concern or thoughts on that?
I will be out of town that week.
You'd be out of town that week.
Mr. Smith, I think there was some discussion, something about the 4th, August 4th or something to that nature.
So there would be a council of the whole meeting the week prior, and then have a special meeting the following week.
Right.
That we could either, it gives an opportunity for them just for citizens to come out and voice their concerns and thoughts prior to. The 4th would be another public hearing to have conversation on it. Potentially, if I understand correctly, we could make a decision on the 4th, or we could, again, schedule another special meeting at that point to have another decision.
I'm thinking about people's vacation schedules, and I'm also thinking about Barry. I think it would be better for the public, we'd have more public discussion as we get into August. People will be more likely to be around, and they're going to be getting ready for, if we have school with their children, that type of thing.
So pulling up my calendar here. Do we want to try to wait until the first week of August, or is there going to be other time? I mean, it's hard to get all of us together anyways, outside of our normal time. Is there any thoughts of trying to do this on August 4th and then have another one shortly thereafter?
I would be in agreement with you on that. I think the 4th would be a good time to do it. provided we have enough meetings with people and their input.
Is there any, I'm looking at our law director here, if there's any issues with having a couple within that time frame? It can be the whole meeting, another special meeting soon after.
No, that would be entirely up to council. So the
Okay.
only concern that I would have is that you cannot consider the legislation any sooner than July 31st. So you could hold your committee of the whole meeting prior to July 31st. You can hold your public hearing prior to July 31st, but you can't act on any legislation until after the 31st. So that's why I had proposed the dates that I did. But if that week of the 28th is difficult and you want to do it on the 4th because that's clear for everyone, you can schedule your committee of the whole. You have flexibility there, whatever you want to do.
I think the public needs, as I stated before, they need to have the input, and they're going to be more likely to be here in August than they are in July. Many people, I don't know, maybe they're doing staycations now, but most people usually take their vacations in July. And I would like to have as much public, I personally would like to see as much public input as possible about it.
Yeah, I
I don't
agree.
think any of us don't want to see any public input on this. I think it's important that whenever we schedule this first meeting, there wouldn't be any action. Having it prior to the 31st may be more appropriate because anybody could call it to be voted on after the 31st, so that way we know for certain there isn't any action. Is there any concerns about having it the week prior to the 27th? On that note,
I would prefer not to.
This just being the committee of the whole,
just the committee of the whole, just
not the
to-
public hearing.
Correct.
We currently have nothing scheduled for the 21st. That would have been
The council meeting.
your council meeting night anyways, before the summer schedule.
Is there any concerns on having a committee of the whole at that point to allow public input?
That worked out perfectly for me.
No concerns? No.
So if you do the 21st, then you're going to have a second meeting?
We would still go with the August 4th as another special meeting as well. My hope is that we try to have as many as we can prior to the opportunity to vote. Knowing that that following week, Barry won't be able to be here. Councilman Van Hoosen, my apologies, won't be able to be here. It may be appropriate for us to do that the following week. And I know we would encourage anybody to send emails or communicate with us prior to, so that way we all receive as much communication as well. But I think if we can find ways to accommodate an extra meeting in there, just to allow people to come and voice their concerns directly, would be prudent.
I'm in agreement with you, Jonathan, on that.
You're saying two committees of the whole on July 17 and August 4?
July 21st and then August 4th.
Would August 4th be your public hearing date?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And it's August 4, I don't have a calendar in front of me. Is that,
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday night.
it's a Tuesday, but I can't remember our summer schedule. Would we be meeting that night or?
No,
No.
the only August meeting is on the 18th.
Okay.
So you'd have a public, you'd have meetings that we're going to
I
have.
think 8th,
Council.
or the 4th.
On the 18th.
Both of them.
Well, by both the dates that you've now set as special meetings.
Oh, okay, we'll call it special meetings, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Everyone okay with doing that? So the July 21st and then August 4th for the public hearing.
I assume at 6:30.
So yeah, so we'll just keep them both at 6:30? Is that acceptable?
Yeah,
No objection.
provided we can find a place that's open and available for those dates at 6:30.
If it has to, we have some large facilities here and that we could open up some bays or garage space and
Yeah.
potentially if need be, but
From what I heard from Ms. Alcott, we can have it outside.
yeah, you're about to get mentioned here. All right.
So I didn't write fast enough, July 21, August 4, 6:30.
Yep.
Yes.
Location to be in.
Councilwoman Attorney?
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Ryan. No further report from me.
Thank you. And we will continue to keep, we will make sure that the code notes goes out on the for council to find a location that will allow for adequate space for citizens if they so desire. So we'll make sure that's all disclosed to the public and everybody has an opportunity to be heard. Committee report, thank you very much, Council and President Council. Committee reports, Finance and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mayor Mackin. We actually did meet since the last council meeting. We met on June 9th. Everybody have a copy of the minutes? Or the report, I should call it. Everybody was present. All the committee members were present. Also present were Ms. Alkire and Mr. Krebs, and our Deputy Director of Finance, Amber Rathburn, as well as Mr. Brown, our Tax Commissioner. We went over several things, and three or four pieces of legislation here tonight. The first one was concerning the coronavirus relief funding relative to the Senate Bill 310. I'm not going to read it to you. I'm sure everyone's up for tonight on that piece of legislation. Then we went through the Finance Director's report, and we talked about the things that we typically talk about every month. Expenses over $5,000, the Health and Welfare Fund balance, which is no reason for concern for that. And Mr. Krebs did request approval of legislation regarding the Certificate of Estimated Revenues for 2021, which is my first piece of legislation tonight. Then Mr. Krebs distributed information regarding the renewal of the city's property and liability insurance. And we have a more detailed explanation of that in Ms. Alkire's legislative summary that everybody should have received. And then the Tax Commissioner's report, Mr. Bronner reported, interestingly, the tax collections for the month of May were over $1.2 million, which is up 1% from May of 2019. And everybody, we had a little discussion of why we think it was what it was and what we think is going to be down the road. And time will tell who was right and who was wrong. But again, there's not a lot we can do about that, so there was a whole lot of reason for concern. And then Ms. Alkire did point out, under other matters, that the administration has not received the comparison of First Energy to solar power and light figures that was requested after the presentation in February, but she'll keep us updated. I don't know if you've received anything since then.
I have not. We did reach back out to them, and we haven't received anything yet.
Okay. So I have three pieces of legislation, an ordinance and two resolutions. I'm going to introduce these all as emergency measures and to waive the second and third readings. We can discuss them under the discussion phase separately. Is there any reason that anyone would like me to do them separately and not do them all together? Okay, we'll do them all together. So I would like to introduce ordinance 5/2020 and resolutions 29/2020 and 30/2020, and move the rules be suspended to allow for the reading by number and title only and dispense with the second and third readings.
Second?
Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance number 5, 2020, authorizing submission of an estimate of revenue to the Wood County Budget Commission for the budget year beginning January 1, 2021, and declaring an emergency. Resolution number 29, 2020, a resolution affirming that funds from the Wood County Coronavirus Relief Distribution Fund to the City of Perrysburg may be expended only to cover costs of necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to the coronavirus disease 2019 and declaring an emergency. Okay, and resolution number 30, 2020, authorizing the purchase of insurance through the Ohio Plan Risk Management Incorporated at a cost not to exceed $163,002 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. I move that ordinance 5/2020 be passed as emergency.
Second?
Discussion. Roll call.
Okay, Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mr. Coolman,
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen,
Yes.
Ms. Materney,
Yes.
Ms. Bourne,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I move that resolution 29/2020 be passed as an emergency measure as well.
Actually, Did we not do all,
thought we just did
oh,
all
we just did all three.
No, you just only read it. We read them all. He's doing them each individually.
Oh, okay,
I introduced them.
Okay.
Discussion changes somebody's mind.
my mistake.
I'll second.
Discussion?
Okay, I would like to I've had some recent discussions with Ms. Alkire. I just want to make sure that everyone else has the same information that I have. I don't know if this was anyone else's concern with this piece of legislation, but some of the information that we received, Ms. Alkire gave us all kinds of information, so we would have all the background we could possibly want. And in some of that background information, it did rises of the fact that there will be some potentially some small business loans available through the city, some grants. And I was curious as to whether or not this piece of legislation covered that, and if so or if not, what the procedures would be for the submission of applications for grant money from the city of Perrysburg for businesses that are located only in Perrysburg, and how that either will all play out or is anticipated to play out. And she had some answers for me earlier, so I'd just like her to fill everybody in on that.
Sure. So Senate Bill 310 does allow for small business grants, not loans, but grants, be available at a local level for what's considered a small employer. That's employers that have 50 or fewer employees. Anyone who is a small employer, they've deemed the local legislative authority as being that authority to have the jurisdiction to dole out those grants. It's not included in your summary, although it was included in the supplemental information that Councilman Matuzak referenced, because the establishment of a grant program falls under the purview of City Council. So once to pursue a grant program, this body would have to vote on the creation of the grant program, the rules applying to that grant program, and how that grant program would be administered. So that would come in a separate piece of legislation to you. The state legislators have deemed it as being something within the legislative authority, not an administrative authority. So I would think that administratively we'll be discussing it and then bringing it to committee and to council once those funds are received by the city from the county.
I'm not clear. Is Senate 310 passed yet? I've not seen where
It
it's
has
passed
not
yet.
passed. It has not passed. I checked as late as last evening, and it hasn't been scheduled. I don't believe there's any other Senate sessions this week, but there are 2 Senate sessions scheduled for next week if needed. They don't have calendars or agendas yet, so I don't know what they'll be considering.
So, Ms. Alkire, so essentially what we're doing is this is actually money coming, my understanding is it's coming from the federal government, coming to the state, and the state is going to be distributing, if possible, based on if State Bill 310 passes.
That's correct. The state of Ohio has received the federal dollars. They need now to pass their legislation, which has already passed the Senate once. When it went to the House, it was amended, so now just those amendments have to go through the Senate, which I believe the Small Business Grant Program was a House amendment that they dealt with. So yeah, once the Senate passes it, we would expect it to, we would expect that it would be signed into law fairly quickly. At least our partners at Ohio Municipal League are telling us it should go through fairly quickly. Once the dollars are distributed to the individual county auditors, the county has 7 days then to distribute it to the local municipalities, townships, other jurisdictions.
Legislation in some form is going to pass because the state has the money and they're required to dole it out to the subdivisions.
Yes, sir.
That's the only thing they can do with it. They're sitting on it right now. So it's
Yes,
going to
sir.
happen. It's just, we're going to have what's the legislation going to say? What are the details going to be? But they're pretty much subject to using it for what the federal government said they have to use it for.
That's correct.
It's just a trickle-down effect is what we're going to get. So it's going to happen. We have a gentleman that would like to ask a question. Can you ask a question?
I just was curious, when she read that, or you maybe you read it, I thought you said the year 2019. Is that correct?
No, it's Senate.
Well, it's called the coronavirus disease 2019, which is
I just wanted to
COVID-19.
double check
And
that.
just because we're on telephone, your full name and address?
Fred Lajeunesse. I'm actually in Monclova.
You're still welcome.
Any other discussion? That's all I wanted to bring up.
Okay,
Just
yeah,
make sure that everybody understood that there was going to be some.
Just a question on timeline, Laura. I think at committee, you indicated that the city will get, I think we talked to the vicinity, $500,000. And given the timeline, I don't think that money was going to reach us until the fall. Correct? That appears to be correct.
No, we'll get it much sooner than fall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
When will, if we did a grant program that local small businesses could apply for, do we have an idea of when we might be asking for those applications?
Yeah, so the fall deadline, I think you're referencing, and this is important. City Council is going to have a couple of issues in front of you, but by October of 2020, any funds not encumbered by the city have to be returned to the county auditor. And then by December 28th of 2020, any funds not expended by the city have to be returned to the State Director of Budget and Management. So once the funds are received, and we received communication from Wood County yesterday, fairly recently.
Today, yeah.
Our estimated CARES funds receipt is actually a little bit higher than what we anticipated. It's $627,628. So Dave is going to have a lot of work to do. He has to create a fund specifically for those dollars. That won't require your legislative authority just to create a fund, but then those dollars are going to have to be encumbered for specific purposes, and that's where the discussion is really going to have to come into play. If you want to take advantage of this grant opportunity for small businesses, then that's where you determine what you'll be attributing to grants. It's also for reimbursements and expenses of the city in dealing with the pandemic. And
As I recall, when we had our discussion with the Finance Committee, I recall that it was supposed to be going toward more public safety, so for type police type things, that kind of thing. And then the idea was to bring the report or the itemized ideas to the Finance Committee for us to take a look at, and then send it to council if possible or needed.
well, once the reimbursements are established through that fund, we've been tracking our expenses all along. So whether it's public safety or public service, there's been expenses incurred by the city. What we ultimately said, and I think I think Mr. Matuzak reinforced this, we can only spend it on certain things. The federal government's already decided what we'll spend it on. But we did say we would like to use the Finance Committee as a reporting tool to communicate how these funds are being spent.
And these funds are separate from other grants that we may have gotten.
That is correct.
Therefore, I know the fire department, the fire division has applied and received some funding. This is a more block type grant, as long as we can document the expenditures. And it's like, for example, the service department has been, in the street division, have spent a significant amount of money related.
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't there something in there about PPE that I remember seeing? As I recall?
Any expenditures for PPE, sanitizing, extra man hours of employees, those are all considered eligible
I would say
reimbursements.
that we should go that route, because as I recall in the past, if we still have it, there used to be monies already available for small businesses. Does that fund still exist?
Not grants.
Not on grants.
Given the funded and amount of funding, I think it's something worth investigating whether we can make funds available to help small businesses.
And who would these small businesses be?
Well, that would get the council to decide.
It's going to be up to, like,
And by definition, a small business is someone who has fewer than 50
Right.
employees.
And the city has done that in the past. Councilman Carter remembers, we have done certain types of small grants or loan type situations. So some form of that could be used as the template to structure some part of that.
Not to beat this up, but
actually, what we used was the Municipal Development Fund monies for the downtown
Yeah,
grants.
that's what I was talking about.
Right.
I don't want to beat this whole issue up during the discussion phase, but Tim appeared non-verbally to be surprised that there's even more money than the $500,000. And Ms. Bourne, it sounds like she might be concerned that money would be potentially doled out in grants and not used for PPP
Correct.
and safety things. But
Correct.
keep in mind, if this is only the first $315 million that the state has, we're sitting on another $850,000 for round two, and we don't get to participate in round two if we don't spend everything in round one. So I don't think the issue is going to be, oh, we can have enough money, it's going to be, we got to spend this, or we got to give it
Well,
back.
we want to be fit,
And
fiscal
we're looking at,
stewards.
round two is a bigger, it's 2.5 times what round one is, and we're getting $600,000 in round one.
Well, I guess the issue on the at hand would be, we have to receive it first.
We're gonna,
Correct.
we're gonna get it, that's a foregone
And
conclusion.
we're happy to work with them, with council on how best, we want to be good fiscal stewards certainly, but we also, we want to make sure that the funds are available and they have to be encumbered by a particular time.
Right.
And so we're going to make sure we
Is there any reason, this is, I'm gonna get to the passing, but is there any reason the city can't start putting together whatever is needed for the applications for the small businesses so that when we get the money, we don't have another month of waiting for the administration to put together a loan package or a grant package? We can be off and running when the money comes in.
We started having that conversation last week, as well as reaching out to some of our other economic development partners to see if they already had systems in place we could look at.
And even getting the word out to the public. So, because what we don't want is, this did happen with the PPP loans because everybody jumped on it because the banks were incentivized to loan out money. So they called everyone they could think of to loan out money. But I think we should take the same approach as making sure that there's not a small business in Perrysburg that doesn't know that we have this money available because it's not costing us anything. And if we don't give it to our own small business, and some other small business in another jurisdiction is going to get it. It's not going to go back to the federal government. It's going to go back to what we don't spend goes back to the county auditor, and then he redistributes it to somebody else in the county.
That's correct.
I'd kind of like the people in Perrysburg to have that. We've got a lot of small businesses here in Perrysburg, 150 people.
I will ask Mr. Krebs this question. Being a fan, obviously, of small business in general, but small business as well, I think, didn't we have some kind of fund that was set up, as I recall, that could possibly be given to people,
Well,
small businesses?
I-
I remember it did exist.
I suspect that you're thinking of the revolving loan fund.
That may be
the
it.
RLF, and that is, we do not give grants, although many people call me thinking that we do that. What we do is provide small or low-interest loans to small businesses, and it's based on job creation and job retention. Is a very finite formula that we use to, so that is all CDBG money, if you know what that is. And there's a whole lot of restrictions on how much we can loan. So that is a very tight window. Yeah, this would be much more. There'd be much more flexibility to be able to help businesses who don't necessarily meet the strict criteria of the revolving loan
I
fund
guess
loans.
the
So
elected legislative bodies are duty to do as much as that.
We are working on that at the councils.
I think that we should not forget about
Anyone
our,
that doesn't.
I just think we should not forget about our police department and what their needs
Oh,
may be,
absolutely.
particularly now with everything that's been going on, current events, et cetera. They're going to need the funding.
right, well, I can speak, I think, pretty safely to say that none of our departments, including the police and fire, are going without anything that they need right now. We are doing okay. So.
Although it isn't to say that they might not be, though.
Well, I think as I say here, the consensus of the council is we want to make sure we use all of the resources that are available to reimburse the city and also provide loans or grants to local businesses to help the local business owners who are helping the community. I think we're on the same page with that.
Good. Appreciate that. So I move that, which one are we on here?
29.
Can we get a vote? Yeah, we have discussions because we now need to vote.
Yep.
Roll call.
Oh,
Well,
Robert,
I was gonna say, I don't know if we moved for passage yet.
Oh, no, we're in discussion phase. Yeah, we were in discussion.
Okay.
We were in discussion. We're in discussion.
As long as Mary Jo's got a motion and a second, we're good. Okay, roll call.
I'm just,
Okay, roll call. Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Thank you. I move that Resolution 30, 2020 be passed as an emergency measure.
Second?
Discussion? Roll call?
Okay, Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Smith. Oh, I'm sorry, you already voted. Mr. McCarthy. Sorry. Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mayor, that's all.
Thank you very much. Councilwoman of the Service Committee?
We vote once.
We did not meet last month, so I have no minutes of the meeting. We're supposed to meet 24th, I believe, but with nothing on the docket, I'm tentatively canceling this month's meeting. I will let everyone know the Monday before Easter. That's all I have.
Thank you. Safety Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have no report. Our next scheduled meeting is June 23rd at 6 p.m.
Thank you. Councilman Van Huzen. Recreation Committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a report tonight. We met on June 9th, and present were Deborah Bourne, Councilors Jonathan Smith and Jan McKinney, Medturney, sorry. Councilwoman Bourne called the meeting to order at 6:40 p.m. in Council Chambers. After the Pledge of Allegiance, citizen concerns were requested, with Mr. Smith reporting concerns regarding the playgrounds reopening. This has been addressed, and per the governor's orders, all playgrounds will be open as of June 10th, 2020. Chairwoman Bourne mentioned that she had received questions about the swimming pool as to when it will be opening or if it will be opening this year. She also mentioned that the tennis and pickleball courts have now reopened following Governor DeWine's orders. Under old business, Cannon Park, Riverside Cannon stands, there was no discussion. The inclusive playground, Chairwoman Bourne stated that Ryan Wickman, who was working on the project in Rotary Park, indicated that due to the coronavirus pandemic, fundraising has slowed down for this year, so the project will be continuing next year, 2021. Ms. Bourne commented that she is pleased that the project is going forward. Ms. Materney mentioned that Mr. Freeze had donated $5,000 to the inclusive playground project. Regarding the splash pad, there was no discussion. The multi-purpose sports wall, Ms. Bourne mentioned that Damon Gores had presented the idea to the Recreation Committee at a prior meeting. He indicated that it could be used for lacrosse and soccer teams. The estimated cost would be $15,000. Ms. Materney agreed that she thought it was a good idea. Ms. Bourne added that hopefully Mr. Gores will be at the next Recreation Committee meeting to discuss it. Under new business, Ms. Bourne discussed the idea of a handball court to be constructed on the west side, which was suggested by Al Rava of Maple Street. He is also known as Mr. Tennis in Perrysburg. Ms. Bourne indicated that Mr. Rava suggested that we may need to raise proceeds for this project. PBASC Financials request, Ms. Bourne requested that she will request the financial report from Mr. McGrady so it can be reviewed at the next meeting. Under the swimming pool, regarding the opening of the pool, there was quite a discussion about it. Ms. Materney said that she heard a lot of information about that, and the health department regulations limited the amount of people allowed there versus sold, which would create issues for scheduling and reservations. Ms. Bourne mentioned that she was very disappointed that the pool was closed this year, and that for many years the pool was available to the city of Perrysburg residents for their enjoyment. It was initially available to Citizens First and then surrounding communities for an additional cost. Ms. Materney also agreed with Ms. Bourne that she was disappointed that the pool was closed. Ms. Materney mentioned a deficit of $150,000. Mr. Smith added that he was curious to see how many people would purchase passes for the pool this year and possibly next year due to circumstances. He agreed that he initially thought the deficit was a lot of money. However, after some research and compared to surrounding cities, it is like across all municipalities. He then questioned if any of the pools had opened this year due to new regulations. Other new business, Ms. Warren mentioned that any issues in which the administration wishes this committee to review must be reviewed by the chairman by the close of business the previous Friday. Any issues received after that time will be tabled until the next meeting. Under other business, Ms. Matroni said she was happy that we have a summer recreation program available. Ms. Warren agreed that it is a great program and has been around for years and is proud of the 12 parks available to our community. Mr. Smith agreed. Under prep report, no report because there is no meeting held. And I will add that there's no prep meeting again for the first part of July, according to the chairman, Jessica Kelp. Under adjournment, the adjournment was at 6:52 p.m. Respectfully, Deborah L. Bourne, Recreation Chairwoman.
Next meeting, you say that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Planning and zoning?
Thank you, Your Honor. We met on June 10, President, myself, lead members Corey Coleman and Gary Van Hoosen, also President Bridget Cabot, our city administrator Laura Elkire, law director Brody Walters, and Mark Easterly from our planning and zoning division. First item that night was a gentleman on East 6th Street who was present to request a waiver so he could keep an 8-foot fence that he had built on the side of his house. He said that it has a lattice at the top, which is what puts him over the 6-foot limit. He apparently didn't know he needed to get a permit before installing it, but he did say his neighbors are happy with the fence. I informed Mr. Hooper, the citizen, that City Council cannot grant a waiver for something that a subordinate body could not grant. Mr. Walters explained that the code only allows 8-foot fences in industrially zoned areas. Mr. Van Hoosen asked about the definition of an offense. Brody Walters read the code section. Fences, walls, structural screens, hedges, and screen plantings shall include all structures, shrubs, planting, or trees used to separate, enclose, screen, or demarcate a boundary. Mr. Coleman asked if Mr. Hooper would be in compliance about the lattice at the top. Mr. Hooper said that he would be, but it would not be as decorative. I did ask that Ms. Elkire and Brody Walters look at a handful of similar cities to see how they handle this issue, especially the use of something like a lattice, which does not create an entire barrier that you can't see through. We will take this up next month, and we invited Mr. Hooper to join us at that time. We then talked about an issue that actually had been raised here at council about the 6-foot limit on bushes and plantings. And also we talked about the effects of trimming arborvitae to meet the 6-foot limit. I noted that if you drive around town, if you keep an eye out, you'll see a lot of non-compliance regarding this issue. I did ask what the objection is to natural plantings, and Mr. Walters explained that in planting, urban planting that is, it's about the impact of visual impairment, and regardless of the material, it changes the view and the openness. The planting is a blocked view. Ms. Cabot had spoken to the Public Service Director and Deputy Director, and they offered that they could recommend a list of plantings that would not go beyond the 6-foot limit and provide details on how to stagger them as they are planted. And we at the committee agreed that would be helpful. There was also discussion about homeowners not being aware of this section of the code, and I invited Ms. Elkire to think about enforcement. We have so many properties that are not in compliance, and if she wishes to provide any legal opinion, the council should do that in writing, subject to the attorney-client privilege. Next, we talked about an issue that some of you will recall from 3 years ago. That is the issue of raising hens. At that time, we clarified the definition of specialized animal raising, but we did not approve the general urban raising of the hens. We did adopt a system at that time where citizens who already had chickens could register them, but it did not allow for any new ones. I said that at the time I was in support of allowing chickens, and I, speaking for myself personally, envisioned this interim registration system as a trial run to see if there were complaints or objections to the keeping of hens. Mr. Van Hoosen said that he did not feel it was fine with the result the last time, and Mr. Coolman said he thinks it's a good time to re-examine the issue. Ms. Cabot said that there have been instances of non-compliance, but there have been minimal complaints. Mark Weber was present and pointed out that when he was chair of the safety committee, City Council had been asked to consider enforcement language. Ms. Elkhart explained that when the issue was addressed in 2017, a new language was added. No enforcement language is added in the code in the event someone raised hens without following the registration system. Mark Weber asked that the committee keep in mind that the chickens are a personal food source. We had distributed, I shouldn't say we, it was Brody and Laura had distributed the documents that we looked at from last time, and we're all going to review that, and the issue again will be discussed at our meeting next month. Mr. Walters gave an update for the committee on a boundary review of the historic district that is underway. The historic district is defined in the ordinance with a legal description. However, it's been discovered that based on that legal description, at least two properties are half in the district and half outside the district. Garcia Surveyors was hired to plot out the legal description by parcel. Brody Walters will then review the drawing and make a recommendation on whether to add or subtract the properties with the oddities. He said that a cleaned up boundary makes sense and that it will then provide a visual of the entire historic district. Finally, Ms. Elkhart raised an issue regarding outdoor cafes. One of our downtown restaurant owners has asked if they can add 3 tables to their outside cafe area, but those would be located outside of the fenced-in area as part of their sidewalk lease. The administration was agreeable to that, but reminded the owner, the restaurant owner, that they could not serve liquor outside the fenced-in area because no liquor permit would allow it. The Ohio Liquor Control Board was asked to and did extend the permit to include the additional tables outside the fence through August 5, 2020, and noted that it may be further extended. Nevertheless, our code requires that the entrance to an outdoor cafe that serves liquor be from the building. Ms. Elkhart requested that the committee recommend approval of legislation that temporarily waives that requirement regarding the entrance in section 123504, for as long as the treatment allows, for no longer than November 1, 2020. We, the committee, agreed 3-0 to recommend approval of this resolution, granting this request to help out the downtown businesses. We meet again on Wednesday, July 8th at 5:30 p.m. And we do have a resolution regarding outdoor cafes, so I would like to introduce Resolution 31-2020, and move that the rules be suspended to offer its reading by number and title only, and to dispense with the second and third readings.
Second. Roll call.
Okay, Ms. Bourne.
Yes.
Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Okay, resolution number 31, 2020, temporarily suspending section 1235.04 MM3 relating to the regulation of outdoor cafes and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Mayor, I have a discussion.
We'll have to wait for,
I would move that Resolution 31, 2020 be passed as an emergency measure.
Second. Discussion.
Yes, thank you. Regarding Resolution 31, 2020, I'm just going to mention to you what I found, what I see. This is the beginning of DORA without public input. Why are we worried about one restaurant/bar, and it's obviously Stella's, I've walked by several times, and that's obviously the one that's done it, although not mentioned here. We should not be expanding. Additional tables without a fence is not appropriate and against 1234.04.3 of the city code, codified ordinances. If you have to go through a front door, this would not be directly near a front door. Where are we giving Stella's permission to do this? And then who else is going to do this following it? as I recall in reading this, the fencing is required by the Ohio Department of Liquor Control and 1235.04 of our codified ordinances. It requires tables where alcohol to be served to be accessible only from the building. The city administration granted permission from the expansion and advised the proper owner, in this case, as was stated, Stella's, that due to liquor control restrictions, alcohol would not be permitted to be served at additional tables, and the property owner received a temporary permit expansion of their liquor license to permit alcohol to be served at the additional tables until August, I believe it was August 5th, temporary expiration. What I saw was, according to the administration's basically giving a blanket suspension based on what is the owner of Stella's has done, violating alcohol in an unfenced area, is attempting to extend this violation to a restaurant/bar in the downtown area. I think that needs to be discussed, and I would say that I am not going to be supporting this.
Mayor, I'm not entirely familiar with this whole thing, but I guess my question would be, on these additional tables, do they actually increase the number of tables that would be used by Stella's outside, or was it because of the social distancing that they wanted additional tables because they couldn't use all the tables in the fenced-in area because of the social distancing? And that's why I don't know the answer to that. I'm just curious.
Actually, I would have to pull up their initial permit application, which I can do, but I know that they wanted to add the 3 tables to be able to accommodate the social distancing, whether that replaced, I don't know how many tables were necessarily in that fence to begin with.
My understanding is that, yes, they keep social distancing, that there were fewer tables per
Right,
fenced
so they
area.
increase the number.
So they're replacing, by keeping the social distance, by putting it into the sidewalk, and then they got approval to do that from Liquor. To do that, we then said, well, you still don't have our compliance. So then they had to go through, jump through hurdles, and they did that. So I think we're comfortable that the Liquor Control has approved it, and we're recommending, and have recommended to the council the short-term variance to address
Yeah,
that
this
issue.
just goes hand in hand with trying to give them grant money. We're trying to do whatever we can to help them out.
Right.
So that
We're not
they reduce
reducing them
revenues.
from-
I don't see the harm in,
The only,
you know.
I would like to clarify a couple things if I could. I just want to clarify my own understanding because I think my viewpoint runs contrary to what information Deborah thought, or I guess passed along there. It's my understanding that initially they had requested tables, but in the initial conversation, we couldn't allow them because they couldn't serve liquor. And then the liquor board granted them a temporary permit that allowed them to serve liquor in this fashion for alcoholic beverages until October 31st, right? Which is where we came up with that November.
Right. They couldn't, we allowed them to have the tables.
Right.
That said, you can't serve alcohol.
correct.
Then they went and got Liquor Control to say they were giving a variance so they could. So that's why we're coming back and saying,
Right,
we're
yeah,
making this request.
And it's actually the city, it's my understanding what we did at Planning and Zoning, we anticipate that the liquor board may extend their date even further or extend some of these permits, so we're limiting how long
It's going to get cold.
it will be
Well-
acceptable to that November 1st date. is what we
Because,
requested, right?
because the city would not be privy to whether or not it was extended or terminated early. If you look actually at the temporary permit, it could be rescinded even earlier than August 5th by Liquor Control. Because we wouldn't be privy to that conversation, we felt it best to have a true stop date to where we knew from this point on, regardless of whether or not Liquor Control lets you have it on Christmas Day, we are not permitting it past November 1st.
Okay. So that was my understanding. I don't view this as door out at all.
And just to be clear, this is also just consistent with the notion, I know council raised it last time, and a lot of committee members said, what are we doing to help small businesses?
Right.
Given the guidance and restrictions that have been placed on social distancing. This is consistent with that.
And I would assume Stella has lost some of their indoor tables as well to comply with the health department's request.
I think our conversation included examples of other cities, people use their parking lots to put tables in so that they can increase their numbers of patrons because they got social distance. And this is just an example of doing the same thing, but we're using our sidewalks.
I think this is a prudent action for us to move forward with, just because these businesses are all suffering. The more we do to help, I think the better. And I think that this is not necessarily a direct impact on the Dora conversation, because if I understand Dora, they can't have it on their premise anyways, and that sidewalk where there's tables would be considered the premise of the business, not necessarily of a outdoor walking area.
It's public right of way. We give them a lease to use the fenced-in area to be able to serve alcohol within.
Something I would add to that is I noticed that you're speaking of helping small businesses. Well, it's not helping Vivian Cade because the tables are so close to Vivian Cade. It's ridiculous. And I didn't see any social distancing going on when I both walked by and I drove by on different occasions. And I think it's unfair to Vivian Cade because now you can sort of see it or sort of get in there, but you can't because this guy is encroaching on her space, so to speak.
Have we received any complaints from that business?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
But the people that are patrons there have complained about it.
To who?
They've complained to me.
Oh, okay. I'm not aware that we've received any complaints about that, no.
Okay. I'm just,
I get a lot of complaints. I would not receive that one. But if there are concerns, that we would certainly take into
I think they're
consideration.
valid.
And the spacing, I'm not discounting at all, and I'm taking that as face value, but if he's encroaching on the neighbor building space, that's not what, chairs are supposed to be able to take place. But we're not in the, we'll do our best to work with any, if there are concerns, we'll certainly work to address.
Something else to consider is it does get in the way of the farmer's market, and my understanding is it's going to be opening the first part of July. So given the numbers of people that go down there, I would hate to see the city being liable, falling on a chair or what have you, because it's not fenced in area.
We actually had raised this issue with Ms. Latcham of the CVB with discussion to the opening of the farmer's market. And she has confirmed that these 3 tables are not in the way of the farmer's market and don't pose a problem for them. And I do have just a follow-up response. Mr. Matuzak, you asked whether or not it was to compensate for lost seating. I pulled up their application, and the application notarized statement from the owner does state that the additional 3 tables are necessary to compensate for lost seating due to distancing requirements.
Makes sense.
and I think we are at risk of being somewhat hypocritical if we say, how can we help you, and then we turn down these kind of requests. So I'll definitely be.
Any other discussion?
Yes, are we going to help all the other small businesses in Perrysburg as well? I mean, are we, if they come forward and they ask for something like that, do we help them?
If there's a way we can, we will.
Yeah, what he said. That's what
He said.
Yes, certainly. We're certainly, from the administration, I don't speak for council, but I think what has been conveyed to me is that we all recognize it's our unique circumstances, and it's a tough business climate, and to the extent we can be business friendly, we certainly will do that, and we want to make sure that we're fair and do things in the right way. So, but we also think that, there certainly are some difficulties in running a retail or restaurant in today's environment. No further discussion, roll call.
Okay, Mr. Van Huzen.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mr. Matuzak.
Yes.
Ms. Materney.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Coolman.
Yes.
Ms. Boren.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else?
No, sir. Nothing further.
Personnel committee?
I have not conducted a meeting since we last met. Next scheduled meeting, which I intend on, I haven't heard of anything that's on the agenda, so I anticipate that being canceled, but I will come to that conclusion by the end of the week. So I will let the members know by the end of the week whether that meeting on the 23rd is going to move forward.
Thank you. Public utilities?
Thank you, Your Honor. Last but not least, we do not have a report for this meeting here today. Our next scheduled meeting is on June 24th at 6:30 p.m. and we will be holding a meeting that we are going to discuss late fees and some other aspects of fees within the water system. So Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any other business to come before council?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.